repressed financial system, and then what are the problems and why the repressed financial system exists in many developing countries. And then next week, or I will start this week, then I'll focus on the financial liberalization, which is basically to address the financial repression, or to address the demerits or the limitations of the financial repression. Now, when we talk about the financial system, the main idea behind the financial system is the developed financial system, or the development of the financial system can encourage your long-term growth. Okay, so that is the main idea, that for long-term growth, that the financial system can have independent and causal impact. Okay, so it can affect the long-term economic growth independently, as well as the causality is from the financial system to the economic growth. Okay, long-term economic growth. Now, the main channel through which the financial system can affect the long-term economic growth is investment. So that's why I said it is the capital formation, which is investment. Okay, so the capital formation and how the capital formation or investment can be affected by the financial system, whether it is a repressed system or whether it is a liberalized financial system. Okay, we'll see that. Now, there are two broad views that, we know that the development of the financial system is necessary, and we also know that it can affect the long-term growth. Now, some people say that, as the economy grows or as the economy develops, then the financial system also develops automatically. So it might not be that independent. It might be independent, but it is not completely independent in that sense that just by developing your financial system, you may not be able to ensure high economic growth or long-term economic growth. Okay, because you need to have economic development or overall economic development, which can ensure the development of the financial system. And so that is one view, and the other view is obviously no, for long-term economic growth, it is essential. It is a precondition to have a developed financial system. Then now we are having, since the summer 2007, we had this financial crisis all over the Western countries. Now these development thinkers, they are thinking it in a different angle. Now they are telling that, okay, these countries had a developed financial system, then why we are having this sort of financial crisis? Okay, what are the problems? Why not the development of the financial sector or developed financial system in the developed countries? Why they are causing lower growth or even causing a negative growth in these countries? Okay? So therefore, we need to understand how the liberalization can affect your economic growth negatively as well. Okay? So the main idea is that we need to understand how the investment can be augmented, investment can be increased through the financial intermediaries, and how that can affect your long-term economic growth. Now, in that, you can also link the income inequality or the level of poverty. To what extent the developed financial system or the overall development of the financial system can improve or can reduce the level of poverty, or can improve the income equality. Now, some people say that, in terms of the income inequality, possibly the relationship is not linear, which is like a Kuznets type of analysis, like at the initial stage of development, possibly any development in the financial system may not have any significant impact on the level of poverty as well as on the income inequality. Why not? It's because even if you develop your financial system, maybe many sectors, but even the poor people may not have enough access to that system, developed system. So therefore, at the initial stages, possibly the poverty may not go down, but as the economy develops or the financial sector develops, the banking sector develops, it goes further and further down in the rural areas, then possibly the poor people will get the advantage of the financial system, a better financial system. But the other people say that no, in an underdeveloped financial system, when we say that when your financial system is repressed, then these banks, the commercial banks, they normally go for large-scale investment, okay? Because everything is controlled by the state, And therefore, it is the poor people or the poor households, they will be more credit constrained under any repressed system. When your system is very much controlled, the financial system is controlled, it is mostly the poor people who will face the constraint. Okay? They cannot finance their investment, they cannot become entrepreneurs, and therefore, because of this credit constraint, they cannot overcome the level of poverty, or they cannot improve their per capita income. So therefore, any improvement in the financial system will favor or will have a larger impact, disproportionately larger impact on the poor household, because the rich household, they are not credit constrained under a repressed system, they are not credit constrained under a liberalized system. They can always have, they are politically connected, have got better access. So even if the system is underdeveloped, still the richer household or the corporate sector, the big corporate sector, they can always have easier access to this system. So therefore, it helps the weaker section of the population when the system enlarges through the financial liberalization. Okay. Right. So these are some of the controversies before we start the topic. So we'll try to address some of these controversies to some extent, and that can also tell you why some countries still have a repressed system, although there is an overwhelming evidence that the liberalized or developed financial system can help your long-term growth. Still, in many countries, we observe some sort of or various types of repression within the financial system. Okay. Right. So let's first start with the investment or the capital formation and see what is the role of the financial system. So first we say that it is the investment in a country is not just determined by the commercial banks or the liquidity available. The investment or the capital available to the private sector can be affected by other variables as well. So therefore, the financial system alone cannot determine the investment rate in a country, although it is important in the sense that it is the financial system that will mobilize savings, and that savings will be converted into investment. Well, so in terms of the generating the investment fund or mobilizing savings, it is important, but the other determinants are also equally important for investment. For example, the monetary policy. Okay, in many countries we observe that the central bank is controlled by the state in a way. So therefore, the state will try to control or try to intervene in the monetary policy, where you may end up with a restrictive monetary policy, which means that the banks will not have enough freedom, and particularly the central bank will not have enough independence over the monetary policy. Now, when you have got the monetary policy very much restrictive, then, for example, you can think of the availability of the funds to the banks, or setting the interest rate, okay? This type of thing. So when your monetary policy is very much restrictive, then the investment will be lower, because not enough fund will be available to the private sector, and therefore our investment will be lower when there is a restrictive monetary policy. It could be in the form of even high interest rate, even to some extent, okay? When your money supply is lower. And also, we know that in a repressed economy, it is not just the interest rate, it is also the credit policy also affects investment. Sometimes the investment is guided, it is controlled, it is mandated because the state or the government sets the priority about investment. Okay? It determines the sectors which will have a favorable treatment in terms of the interest rate, in terms of the amount of credit, in terms of the foreign fund, and so on. So in a repressed system, the government, through its central bank, can control the quantity of credit, it can control the price of credit as well. Okay? Because the different sectors can have different interest rates when they borrow money, and therefore the government can channel these funds to different sectors at a different rate. So that can affect the overall investment in that country. And also, the fiscal policy can affect the overall investment in the sense that we know that in most of the developing countries there is a deficit. Okay? And when you have got this fiscal deficit, so which means that the overall availability of the credit, the investment will be lower, because the fiscal deficit means the government is also borrowing from the banking sector. So the private sector and the public sector, they compete with each other to borrow money. Okay? So the private sector will borrow money to fund their investment. The government will borrow money to finance their fiscal deficit. So when you have got this type of competition between the public and private, it is very likely that the banks will lend money to the government first, because the government is more creditworthy borrower. Okay? So the banks will buy the treasury bill and other securities issued by the government, and therefore the net amount available for the private sector will be lower. Okay? So that is the crowding out effect, basically. Because the government is borrowing money from the banking sector to finance its deficit, therefore only the leftover amount will be available for the private sector. Okay? And also, this type of competition can raise the interest rate. Okay? Because there is more demand than the supply, and therefore, because of the high demand for investment fund, the interest rate, the rate of interest will be higher, which will reduce the investment. Now, as opposed to that, suppose you have got a reduction in fiscal deficit by the government. That can also cause a problem for investment, in the sense that when there is a reduction in the fiscal deficit, which means that the government will have to reduce its expenditure. And most of the developing countries, they do not have enough leeway, they don't have enough freedom in terms of their recurrent expenditure. Because the government has got two types of expenditure. One is called the current expenditure, another is called the capital expenditure. Like the salaries of the teachers, the salaries of the doctors, and so on. These are the current expenditure, which you really can't reduce if you want to reduce your fiscal expenditure. But, so therefore, any reduction in government expenditure normally comes from its capital expenditure, which is construction of the new school, construction of the infrastructure, new infrastructure, and so on. So that will reduce the public investment. Okay? So a reduction in fiscal deficit can reduce the public investment, public capital investment. And this reduction in capital investment by the government can also reduce the private investment as well, because there could be a crowding in effect here. Okay? Because the public investment and the private investment, they reinforce one another. Normally, the higher public investment can encourage private investment as well. Okay? So therefore, any reduction in fiscal deficit can, due to the crowding in effect, can lower the private investment as well. Okay? And also, we know that if the government has got a high fiscal deficit, that will lead to higher amount of public debt. So any fiscal deficit will automatically be added to the existing debt, and also it will affect the future investment, in the sense that the higher public debt means there will be higher tax burden on the household, so the household will try to save more to pay the high tax in future, so that they can maintain the same level of consumption. Okay? So apprehending this future tax burden because of the high public debt, then the today's consumption will be lower, maybe the today's investment also will be lower, because the corporate sector also will have to pay the higher tax on their profit. So therefore, the investment will be lower, and this is called the Ricardian equivalence. But there isn't much empirical evidence in support of this hypothesis, the Ricardian equivalence hypothesis, but we can argue that this can happen to some extent, but the empirical evidence doesn't support this very strongly. The other factor that can affect your investment is the economic growth, or the output growth, which is called the accelerator model. So first, today's investment will depend on future growth, right? So the future growth means future demand. So today's investment will be determined by the future demand. But we do not have the data on the future demand or the future economic growth, so that's why the economists will use the current economic growth, for which the data are available. Okay, so we proxy the future economic growth based on the current economic growth. So if the current economic growth is higher, we then say that the future economic growth also will be higher, and to finance or to meet the demand, future demand, the investment